So we'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for calling in and viewing this webinar. I saw something that was really funny a few weeks ago when all these businesses started sending out their notices about coronavirus, and people were just sick of seeing in these unprecedented times. And the person said, "I miss precedented times," and I know there's a lot going on for everyone already, and then this doesn't help the situation with coronavirus and all the changes and fluctuations. But in thinking about how we could offer some guidance for that or some assistance for that, we came together to come to this webinar to say, sharing the successes that we've had that have maybe not directly related to coronavirus and the complexities that it has, but definitely something that made the Diocese of San Jose a little bit more prepared in that case, and the timing kind of worked out, at least for the number of churches or schools that kind of moved under this system in that time. So first off, I'll introduce myself in case you're wondering who I am. My name is Jonathan Bolus. I'm the CEO at St. Joseph Financial Services, the primary service provider that's going to be in question for today. My background is kind of been tied to the church for a while now. I joined seminary right out of high school and quickly learned that the gifts that God gave me were more aligned in not in direct ministry. So I really take to heart this tagline that we have at St. Joseph of more time ministering and less time administering. And I feel like, after realizing that God's call was for me not to be in direct ministry in the priesthood, that being able to assist in the administration part of it really could compound the ministry. So since then, I've done accounting within the church in some capacity since I left seminary in 2010. I took some time to kind of learn what was going on in doing consulting at financial services companies related to internal controls and such, and then public accounting. But once I felt like kind of my toolbox was built up, I came back to the church full time a number of years ago, and really have been trying to push something that is going to be revolutionary in terms of the church's finances and administration as a whole. Joining me for today and people that I really respect and look to for a lot of insight in making that a reality is going to be Brian Mooney, who's the CFO of the Diocese of San Jose. Father Brendan's a little bit caught up right now, but he'll be joining in a minute too. He is a pastor within the Diocese of San Jose and also serves as a Vicar General for special projects in the Diocese of San Jose. And then last but not least, TC Whittaker, who is a leader within PwC within their new ventures division, and someone that we looked to a lot in looking at some of these modeling. So we'll go ahead and get in it, and we'll start off with a poll just to kind of gauge where a lot of people are coming from. So I'm going to launch it right now, and the question here is kind of what are three challenges that you spend the most time combating, and you'll be able to pick a few of them, but these are, and then you do have the option in the case that everything's great. There is that option down there at the bottom, so feel free to pick there, and I'd be happy to get people respond there. We'll leave it up for a few more seconds. You do like the CPE style where I start counting down, but I don't know if it's that urgent for everyone to come through. So I'll close it in about 4 seconds. Okay, great. So here are the results that you see as they come in, as they came in. Principally, for sure, it's delays in receiving information, and that's not a surprise. It's not a surprise for me in terms of someone who was on the side of being a controller and trying to get that information to make decisions or reports. And another part of it, the next biggest one, which again is something par for the course that we've seen, is kind of lack of expertise at local sites. So a lot of times that's tied to receiving the information or not receiving the information. Being able to communicate what you need is not as simple as just saying it. It's also trying to guide them through the process of extracting that information. And then just kind of these other things that are just, you don't have access, or the input errors make it so you can't even rely on the information if you do see it. And what I always talk about is, those are all symptoms of other realities. And so if we look at what are those root causes, it really comes down to these three things from my perspective: that the manual processes have a bunch of symptoms that go downstream of that. Those input errors that we talked about, the delays in receiving information, and even kind of the change management issues. The more time someone's touching it, the more you have to communicate around how the process works. The inability to attract talent is another challenge. And the reality of it is that the church can't pay what market rate is for that talent. And the places that need it the most are the least likely to be able to pay. So there needs to be another solution and another model. And then as I kind of led this off going, even without coronavirus and all that, a lot of you as leaders and a lot of your staff are just working to maintain the status quo, to put on another initiative to create progress. It seems daunting, if not for you, for your staff, and it's hard to get that motivation to go. So if we kind of focus in on these kind of root causes and how you can flip them, we look first at manual processes. And the natural progression from that is to not have manual processes, to have automated processes. And that sounds very simple, but what does that entail, right? And it's the great thing is that there's never been more access and more affordability for high-powered technology. It's right now things that were only available to people that had the most resources 10 years ago are available to all of us on a per user, per month fee. And the amount of native automations between these systems, again, has never been higher than it is at this point. And being able to kind of string those together takes your people out of the process. So it's not dependent upon them to put the information, but it's also not reliant upon their accuracy. The real work is in setup, and the flow happens naturally. And the biggest part of that is making sure that the input's getting correctly. So we'll talk a little bit about how that works, but capturing the information at the point of the transaction so that it doesn't require someone to do something and then take another step and do something else to record the information is another place where you get that big ROI on automated processes. And with talent, similarly, what you do is utilize that scale to increase the return on investment for that staff. So that person is not affordable, that MBA or CPA type person is not affordable at 1 or 2 sites, but they can be at 10 to 12 sites. And we'll talk a little bit about how you could do that. And even if you are able to get them, and some place is able to get the resources, the reality is that once they've kind of level set the church or the school, there's not enough work to kind of keep them interested on an ongoing basis, and you may not be able to retain them. And as far as bandwidth, or not the inability of bandwidth to kind of create true reform, what we see as a solution for that is really having one dedicated team. So that people that are specifically focused on progressing this model, on maintaining the implementation process throughout, because it's one of those continual optimization. I mean, and it's amazing how much the precepts of our faith kind of come through on this idea of kind of continual conversion. I went to Franciscan University in Steubenville, and one of the charisms of the Franciscans is continual conversion, right? You're never done improving, and at least in this life. And that is a model that needs to come to finances as well. It's not just putting a stake in the ground. It's kind of going through and making sure that you're always using and staying abreast of the most efficient ways of processing. So if you look at these three things, what they really, again, boil down to is solutions within these two areas of technology and talent. So the rest of of this presentation is going to be focused on those two things. And to, again, kind of lead into that and start to just see where everyone is, I'm going to launch a poll on what accounting system most of you use. So it's live right now. And if there's, if you use multiple, and this is going to be a single choice, then go ahead and just put other, or sites are free to choose what they do. Leave it up for a few more seconds. Okay, great. So it looks like it's a pretty even split among everyone between QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Online. We have one that's in Blackbaud, and Sage Intact, and then kind of a free for all. And so this has obvious complexities, right? When you're having either within different dioceses or within a diocese or a network itself, when you have disparity, there's a challenge among being able to implement tools in a way, or solutions in a way that's unified, or a way that's efficient, because you're recreating the wheel each time you move to a new site. And within those systems, there's obviously different capabilities. So the suite that we found that has the most capabilities is centered around QuickBooks Online. And it doesn't mean that QuickBooks Online has the most features or has all of the biggest modules or anything like that. But what it does really well, it talks to other industry-leading software. So it is able to take that information and distill it, and these connections are native, so that you're not having to go hire a lot of tech resources to be able to make them work. And for the most part, they communicate with pretty much every bank to get bank feed transaction in there, which is one of the biggest places to remove errors or to reduce processing time. And so this suite is really centered around QuickBooks Online, but it strings together things like tuition management within Fax, or your accounts payable in Bill.com, which is a system that, if you're not familiar with, uses character recognition on submissions of bills to be able to automate a portion of the bill processing, and actually serves as a clearinghouse as well, so that your staff isn't printing checks, stuffing checks, and mailing them out, and so on and so forth. So you can offload some of those routine transactions so that your staff can elevate the level of work that they're doing. Expensify, using for reimbursements or for credit card management, is another powerful tool that has really great interfaces. People like interacting with them. Whether it's teachers or staff or so on, that they feel like they're part of a big organization because they're using these powerful systems instead of paper or other types of software that isn't really designed specifically for user experience. And I know payroll has big variation from system to system and diocese to diocese, but the kind of preferred payroll provider that we use is Gusto, which is growing as a provider in more and more places. It's not one of your kind of conventional big ones that you would have talked about maybe 5 to 10 years ago, but is really rapidly accelerating in market share. And it's definitely has great technology, but one of their biggest differentiators is in service and how responsive they are, and how easily, someone who's never done payroll could process payroll in very short order without being a huge expert. So all of that is great in terms of data. I spend a lot of time in classical education, and there's this idea of 3 modes of learning that you go through grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And it's kind of similarly aligns with if anyone's philosophically kind of trained or theologically trained between like ethos, logos, and pathos. And we see the flow of this data kind of living in that same way, that there's kind of three modes of this information or data flowing through. And it starts with data, and it's important for that to be accurate, timely, and relevant. And that's what you get with these systems. But that's not enough. That's not sufficient to ultimately be able to have that information certainly at your fingertips or for your local leaders to make good decisions. So what we do is we distill that down into a dashboard that is not publicly available right now. So, but there are different dashboarding tools. But the one that we use is called Insights Officer, and it's a aggregation of all that information packaged together to take data and turn it into information. And then once you have information, that's when it's actionable. And at that point, then that serves as the connecting point between the accountant or the person providing the financial services and the local site, that they have one source of truth and they can work on that information to build out, to make good decisions. And the types of information that we're looking at there is enough to be able to be responsive without being drowned in information. There's no shortage of dashboard tools, and maybe it's because of my cookies or search history or whatever. Every time I'm going through LinkedIn or even through my personal Twitter, I'm constantly seeing a new tool that someone is selling for dashboards and such. So having a dashboard is not secret, and even QuickBooks Online does some effort there. But what is important is to take away information that's not useful so that the local leader can focus on what is useful. So what we look at within our dashboards is very simple. Looking at budget projections on our simplified financial statement, looking at working capital and how that's moving and what types of factors are affecting working capital. And then lastly, just looking at some key performance indicators. So being able to understand how those, certain information move in tandem. So yes, your accounts receivable is moving in a certain direction, but is it explained by tuition revenue moving in the same direction? Or are they inversely related, which shows that there's actually a problem with accounts receivable? When you're able to weave points of information together for people, it really comes alive at that point. And this may seem like a radical model in the church. It's not something that isn't necessarily done on a wide scale for sure, but almost in anywhere. But I'll point here and I'll kick it to TC. This isn't something that's necessarily new in private industry. It's something that's well proven and well thought out, right?
Yes, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for inviting me on today. I'm excited to speak with everyone. As you can tell from my accent, I am not in San Jose. I am in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, so please forgive the southern drawl there. But certainly, what you see in front of you, Bill.com, Expensify, Gusto, QuickBooks Online, the company and the business that I run inside of PwC, we have been putting customers on this suite or this bundle of applications for years now, and have been doing it outside of the church in the private sector and working with small and medium-sized businesses to set them up for success. And I do think it's important to talk about the technologies. And I'm a technology guy. I run a software business. That's what Insights Officer does. We're a software company. But I also think it's really important to unpack software to make sure that we really truly understand what software is. In software, they're tools. That's all they are. There are tools that we can put in our hands that will enable us to do things more efficiently, that will enable us to do things without errors or mistakes being made. And that's really what these softwares are. They're tools. But the one kind of really thing that we encourage people around, certainly a lot of the clients that we work with and a lot of the different businesses that we work with, is that we can take these tools and we can layer them over the top of broken processes and broken workflows. And what's going to happen is that thing that you do poorly or that thing that you do badly, you're going to be more efficient at doing that. And so it's not just as simple as saying like, hey, I'll just take some of these tools, slap them together, and here we go. And now all of a sudden I'm going to have this great data. It's going to be complete. It's going to be accurate. And I'm going to be able to make great decisions for my schools and my churches from a financial standpoint. It doesn't work like that, because the real ROI and where you truly get real gains is when you start to look at the processes and the workflows, then enable those with great technologies. And once you enable those with great technologies, now you start to see incredible improvements inside your school or inside your company or whatever it might be that you're working with. I often tell a story, and this sometimes makes sense for folks, but you know, when you in Georgia, in Atlanta, where I live right now, if my air conditioner goes out, I don't really care what kind of wrench or screwdriver the HVAC guy's using when he shows up at my house. I need the air back on. I need my 4 kids to leave me alone. I need my wife to be happy. That's what I'm really after right now, is cold air. And whatever wrench he wants to use, a pair of pliers, is great with me, because what I'm really after is solving the problem. Not necessarily what specific app or piece I'm going to use to do that, but ultimately, what am I trying to solve, and what's the pain I'm trying to fix in the moment? And these, what we know from experience at PwC, from my team, these are great wrenches and pliers and screwdrivers that we can use to solve a much bigger, much more robust problem, which is, let's get accurate data. Let's get it entered in timely. We saw from poll 1, delays in information was the #1 thing. Poll 1, delays in information. And I couldn't agree more, because data delivered to me too late is useless. I mean, it's just as bad as wrong data. I can't make decisions on it. I can't actually improve what's happening or change the course of where my school might be going. So it's not just accurate data, but it's timely data. And then also that data delivered in a way that makes sense, that I can use and make actionable steps from that data. And so that's really what we focus on. This suite is a way to enable it. Jonathan mentioned it earlier, but we live at a moment in time where all this is coming together. And he talked about it beforehand, that before all of these cloud-based applications existed, I would not be on this call right now. No way, it wouldn't happen. But now data is more available. These application programming interfaces, or APIs, are available, and we can connect into these systems, connect them to each other, and also connect our technology into them to then suck this data out, access it, make sense of it, slice and dice it, do all the really interesting things that we can do to it to make it useful for the users. So hopefully that's a little background on that, and kind of further unpacks that, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, that was great, TC. I appreciate you saying that. And actually what you said leads really nicely into the next part of it too, where there is much more to just the tools, like you mentioned. There's even more to the technology and interaction with the tools. And that really what makes them come alive is the talent around it, right? The people that really implement it, get it going, and make sure that it's functioning. So we'll go into another poll now, just to see, again, get kind of a barometer of how you feel about the teams that you have, either locally or at the sites that your network or chancery office services. So how happy are you with the local side? And these are all anonymous, so don't worry. I won't be able to see and send a note to your team or anything like that. Okay, I'll leave it open for a few more seconds. Great. So, similar to the others, there's nothing here that's new, I think, for any of us, but it just confirms that everyone that we've kind of interacted with kind of falls into these middle two places. For the most part, there's some change that needs to happen, but there are good people. And if you're anything like me, or even what we experienced in San Jose, you want to photocopy or 3D print those people so you can just drop them all over the place. And I think that that's probably true across the country. It's true everywhere colloquially from everyone that I know that I've interacted with. But I think it's probably universal. And so what's really powerful about this model is it essentially allows you to do that. So if I show you kind of the talent model that makes this work, what it leads down to is having one person at that head, which will kind of be the coach, the client coach or the local coach. And that person is the leader of everything that you do there. They are managing onboarding and implementation at the local site. And the really great thing is that this person is able to work to 10 to 15 sites, and depending on the complexity of who they're working with and such. And that allows you to then, that gives you that photocopy effect of that person, so that you're getting great return from their abilities. You're getting great return, even if you're paying them 20% more than you would have normally paid someone else. Their output is just so much higher. They're happy because they're effective, they're efficient, and they're able to make a difference, which is what you find most of these people, very few people come to the church to work financial services for the fame and the glory. A lot of people do it because they really want to make a difference, and this is the way that they think that their gifts allow them to do that. The other part, which may be a little bit for surprising people, is to have someone that's specifically focused on accounts receivable. So for school, obviously you're looking at for tuition, in fact, and for a parish, looking at someone that's looking at it from a contributions perspective. But it's just such a key assumption. And especially on the school side, it's such a key area that not only is it incompletely, but it's in the system in a way that it has predictable extract. So we actually recommend and we employ on our team someone that's specifically focused on accounts receivable, so that we know we're using those systems to their best ability. That when we it's kind of like a miniature golf where you have the 3 holes, and depending upon which hole that ball goes into, it's going to come out either the right hole or the wrong hole on the back end and go into the cup. And that's an important part of this AR. So we do recommend that person's there. And the great thing is that they're helping an even greater number of sites. So they typically do have a capacity of 15 sites. And then having a strong bookkeeping platform. So that's that cloud that we showed before. So and that's servicing all your sites. The great thing about that is, any updates are rolled out across your site. You really built it around rules and learning-based accounting systems. And it allows you to get better pricing or support levels, because now instead of each individual site negotiating on their own, you've collectivized your power. So, we've talked about technology, we've talked about the talent. And at this time, I'm going to kick it to Brian Mooney, who I introduced before as the CFO of the Diocese of San Jose, to just give an example of how this works in the real world, because theory is always great, but theory applied is where it really becomes truth. So Brian, please go ahead and just talk about a little bit how it worked in San Jose.
Yeah, so before I jump into how it's worked in San Jose, I want to start a little bit with why we even went down this path with St. Joseph's and how St. Joseph's came to be. So as Jonathan said, there were 2 things that kind of struck me as I came in as the CFO to the diocese, and that was technology and talent. Assessing, did we have both of them? For those of you who know me or know the Diocese of San Jose, you know that I inherited a pretty good location. I mean, we're financially healthy compared to a lot of other dioceses. Didn't have a lot of things falling apart compared to other dioceses, but we still had our challenges. And the biggest thing that shocked me as I walked in the door was that we were in the middle of Silicon Valley and we were using technology that was completely out of date. The technology that we had, actually, our accounting system was on version 2009 in almost 2017, and it was no longer supported. So what I found was that not only was it outdated, but we actually had 9 different databases in the chancery, and none of them talked to each other. And about half of our accounting operations staff's job was just to type data from one database into another database. So immediately I focused on, we need better technology, we need better integrations. And then I looked at our budget and saw there was no money for technology in our budgets. And there's a reason we were still on things from 2009 and previously. So that was a concern. Then I started to look at, okay, what was our talent? And as TC said earlier, oftentimes we set our operations and our processes up by either the technology or the talent we have. And in our case, what I found was we hired our talent based on the technology we had. So we were hiring people to be manual inputters of data into our technology. And that was internally. And then externally, what we found was we had very poor site bookkeeping. And the data didn't make a lot of sense that we were receiving centrally here at the Chancery. So the CFO previous to me had implemented a bookkeeping test shortly before I arrived. The bookkeeping test actually was an excellent test. It really weeded out the people who didn't have the skill sets to be bookkeepers. But we also found that we had very few bookkeepers coming forward to be hired for our locations. And so at any given time, my first year, we had probably 4 sites that were continuously open, and we couldn't find a bookkeeper to hire because we couldn't pay enough for them. And so that became a real issue. My internal staff now became site bookkeepers while we were searching for bookkeepers, and my staff wasn't doing their job internally. And everything kind of flowed down to us solving the problems at the local site levels instead of analyzing data at the central level. At the same time, we had closed 5 schools in 6 years. We had an aging population of principals, and we had 46% of our principals turn over in 3 years because they had retired. And we had a lot of new people who didn't understand the data or what the history of the locations were, and a lot of data that was inaccurate or unattainable to our locations where they didn't have understanding. So that was kind of the backdrop. And Jonathan, we can go to the next slide. So really what we sat down, and I'm blessed here in San Jose to have a lot of very, very intelligent technology people who are on my finance councils, who I'm able to just call and ask for their advice. So as I started to talk to a lot of these leaders, what they came back to was, Brian, have you ever looked at this cloud technology? Have you ever looked at all of these software? You've got a processes problem. And until you figure out your processes and align them better, you really aren't going to solve this. So I sat down with a few of them and started to figure out, okay, let's write a business plan for how we'd solve this internally. And what we came to was the scale that we needed to afford the technology and afford the people we needed was a scale that was larger than the scale of the Diocese of San Jose. The other thing I found was my donors in San Jose weren't really willing to donate if I was only going to try to solve this problem for the Diocese of San Jose. These are guys that work at Google and eBay, and they said to me, look, we solve problems for the world. If you're not trying to solve things for the entire United States, you're not thinking properly about this, and we're not going to give you a penny to make this happen. So as we started to look at this reality, we came up with this idea of let's start a nonprofit aligned and with the Diocese of San Jose called St. Joseph's Financial Services, who could then be able to fit the vision that our donors had, fit the vision that I had, and but also really solve the problems for the Diocese of San Jose. And so that's what we've tried to do. And so this is now, we're a year and a half into St. Joseph's Financial Services, and it's been a huge positive impact on the Diocese of San Jose. It has really taken off within our schools. Our schools department has the infrastructure to be looking at this data, to be requesting this data and wanting this data. And so our schools department has been highly encouraging all of our locations to take on this strategy. Because what it does is it takes it from being taking care of data for data's sake to analyzing data to make decisions. And what we found is that our schools that we put on this platform have been able to think bigger, to make better decisions, and to think in the longer range. What we really had as a problem, and I think this is in most dioceses, is that our locations were thinking about today instead of thinking about a year or 2 or 3 years from now. And now with these dashboards and these information, they're able to think much further into the future. The other thing that's been really nice for us centrally is having this consistency across locations allows us to roll out processes and procedures across everybody without having to get it so that it's perfect for every location, because we already know how every location's set up. We can do it for all locations at once instead of kind of having to be specific from location to location. And then the really nice thing, probably the biggest thing for us, has been the amount of talent that we've been able to attract to St. Joseph's, who has given us this outside view on the diocese and have been real thought partners with us as a diocese, and helped us to think through how do we optimize, not just for our locations that are within St. Joseph's, but how do we optimize and bring along everybody across the diocese so that they're learning from the learnings we're having within our cohort within St. Joseph's. So hopefully that gives you a good oversight of how we've kind of, why we've implemented and how we've implemented within the Diocese of San Jose.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I know there's tons of details within that, and that's a really 100,000 foot level view of it. But I think it tells a lot about what this means when it's in practical use, and not just I had someone at some point in my life talk about the difference between nonprofit leadership and maybe some others that and especially within the church, that so many times people will measure success based on outputs, right? So how much did I put out? If I create X product, how much of X product, how many items of X product did I put out? But really what we're focusing on is outcomes. And I think that this gives an example of where the outputs achieved their proper outcome. It makes you, able to make more effective, to make more decisions. It probably gives your staff a lot more peace, not having to be a pseudo bookkeeper for a site and propping them up from time to time in between turnover, and all of those great effects. And I think so you get to that point and you say, okay, well, that's great. I like everything that Brian said. Well, how do I do it? And there's no misgivings here that there really is two options in front of you for anyone that is interested in implementing this model. You can certainly hire and the talent. You can train them to get them running, and you can build that cloud and that technology that we mentioned before, and the processes that surround it to make that technology effective. There's not anything out here that I left out in terms of by way of playbook, and even us at St. Joseph's. I mean, my principal goal, I kind of started it from the beginning, and I'll end it with the closed parentheses at this point. My end goal in all of this is to make sure that the church is more effective in its ministry, that we're creating more disciples and winning more souls for Christ. So to the extent that I could be a part of that, whether it's directly by providing service by St. Joseph or by showing you what we did, I'm happy to be that partner. But I want to be, upfront about, and we've talked about a little bit earlier, and TC kind of mentioned about all the investment that goes into the creation of that and the implementation of that it's a big effort. And at the same time, I'm also happy to be, we're in a position to be a strong partner for your diocese or for your network. Everything that Brian mentioned about what it does for within his diocese, the kind of intra-diocese benefits are really compounded when we talk about inter-diocese or inter-network benefits. That, by us cooperating and leveraging the effort that's already been put in, we unlock the power of the church united and the church as one, that we kind of come to, without all of us kind of being in the silos, to learn from each other, to aggregate the purchasing power, to be able to have unity among the financial information that is going from place to place, even to create, frankly, reciprocity of staff and being able to collaborate and have systems that are specifically geared towards a church, because now there's a market that someone could clearly tap into with us being united. And I think that it's a choice that kind of lays before anyone at this point that is excited by this model. So so I'll put this last one, this last poll up, just to see, gauge where everyone is at this point, as we kind of get to the end of this. How do you feel about developing a diocesan-wide financial management model? Are you just comfortable with where you are at this point? And maybe that's the case for some people, or do you have a team that you're excited about getting to implement this, or are you looking for help? Leave it up for a few more seconds. Great. So it looks like it's a mixed bag with here. There's some people that are comfortable where they are in relationships. There's some that feel like they have a team that they could do it, and others that need help. I encourage you always to reach out and use me as a resource. You can find me on LinkedIn, or my email is also on our website, stjfs.org. If you want a little bit deeper dive into our playbook, or you want to talk about a future engagement, please do reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So I'll leave it at this point to do just a brief question and answer period. And I've kind of, for the sake of allowing anyone to direct their question, if they want to, or if this inspires any other questions, to kind of put a tag of what the person's role or expertise within this might be. And there's one that came through that I'll ask for Brian Mooney first. So Brian, in the case of doing this with the schools, can you talk about what it was like with working with the Department of Catholic Schools to implement an initiative like this?
So before we implemented this initiative, we actually went to the Department of Catholic Schools and we said, we think this will be helpful to you. And to be completely honest, they had no idea what I was talking about. But I think we had enough trust in the relationship. They said, Brian, you go forward. You tell us that this is going to get us timely data. We're going to trust you. You're the expert. And so it's been a little bit bumpy because, to be honest, the way CFOs look at data and the way superintendents look at data isn't necessarily the same. And there's been a lot of coaching to our Department of Catholic Schools that has had to go on. But it's been huge for me because St. Joseph's has picked up a large part of that coaching of our schools to give them kind of the best practices, the best ideas, and really have trained our superintendent and associate superintendent on how to read financials better so that they can give better advice to our locations. So I think our Department of Catholic Schools was so used to getting so much data and accepting it at face value. They've now become much better consumers of that data, and they now have a much better idea to say, hey, this data just doesn't look right. This just doesn't make sense. This is what good data should look like. And so I actually think we're getting just as much help on our non-St. Joseph schools, because our Department of Catholic Schools has grown through this process with the support they've received by St. Joseph's.
Yeah, great. That's a good point. Yeah, and I'll add into that, actually, just being as one person that's involved in that engagement. It really is an iron sharpens iron kind of thing, where there's things that people didn't previously see as possible that become unlocked. And I had someone say this to me once when I worked at a high school, as a Catholic high school, as a controller, and the technology was just so bad. And I'm not even talking about systems, just hardware. Technology was so bad that all people could envision was get the internet to work. That's all they could see, because it was such a problem. Students couldn't get on, projectors never worked, anything. They were so clouded by that proximate issue that they couldn't see beyond that to what are the possibilities. And he warned us of this, and it became true. And he said, look, you're going to spend tons of money to get this internet to work because it was such a big problem at that time. And he said, but once you're done, there's going to be a brief honeymoon period where people are going to be happy. And then the next thing is, well, can we do this now? Because now all of a sudden you're unlocking the potential of everything else, and they're able to see past that issue. So it's amazing to see that happen also here too, where it's, everyone's definitely appreciative of what you could do. But it naturally leads to questions that you never even thought of, or your staff never even thought of, because they were so guarded by what was right in front of their face and what they couldn't, the really proximate issues. Another question, and I'll kick this one to TC. TC, what kind of level of effort is involved in implementation? As far as expertise from the local site, what do they need? And then also kind of approximate timelines to get something like this running at a new site.
Sure, Jonathan. Very common question. Get that one a lot, and that seems to be something that's always on the front of people's minds. Like, hey, TC, we love everything like you're talking about, this in-state stuff. This sounds wonderful, but what's it look like to get from maybe where I am to this great Shangri-La that you're talking about here? So get this question a lot, and the unfortunate answer, which I think sometimes frustrates people, is it depends. And so the reason it depends is it depends on what kind of mess we're walking into, just to be very direct and frank with everyone. That absolutely influences the time that it takes to get things cleaned up, to make things right, to have best-in-class processes put in place, enabled with technologies, using the automation that we've built at PwC here to make the bookkeeping happen all in an automated fashion, and the trains run on time. It depends on the starting point. And so to give some frame of reference around that, we can do it as quickly as 3 weeks. And we have done it that quickly several times. And then other times it can take months to do it and to do it right. And it all depends on the level of cleanup and the level of mess that we're walking into. So I hate to give a non-direct answer there, but it really does depend. That's the truthful answer. And hopefully those two time frames can help people kind of wrap their mind around, okay, they can do it as fast as 3 weeks, or it could take months to get the situation cleaned up. And probably for the most of the folks on the phone, like if you're putting a mirror in front of yourself and being really honest with yourself, you'll know what bucket you're in. Yeah. You'll know which one you're probably going to fall into. But it's in terms of the lift on the client side, or the lift on the school side, it's not that much. It really isn't, because what's really going to happen is we're going to start getting this data working for you. It's all going to start to work for you. And so we're going to connect bank fees, we're going to connect credit card fees, we're going to make things more efficient. And now all of a sudden your life is going to start to get better, and your life is going to start to get easier. And all the folks at the school, their lives are going to get better, and things are going to start to get easier. And it's like what Jonathan talked about, where all of a sudden things start to open up for you. Certainly expertise, there's no specific expertise that are needed. This is about giving access. It's about connecting to a bank account, things of that nature. So there are some tasks and things to do, but we have a very, very formal process of an onboarding, and we go through very specific phases, and it's all mapped out, and there's steps and there's coaching all along the way. So it's never anything where somebody lobs something over the fence and it's like, hey, good luck, hope it works. It's the opposite of how it works and how it happens. And with that coach that Jonathan was talking about, the man or woman who sits at the top of the pyramid that he was talking about, with that coach, it's an opportunity to rely on that individual right there to help. And certainly having done this a bunch of times, we get better at these things, and we continue to progress and get more efficient at implementing and onboarding folks. So hopefully that helps shed a little light on that and brings that to life. But it's a great question. We get it all the time. And thanks for whoever asked it, because everyone else was thinking it. So thanks for whoever asked it.
Yeah. And I've seen it even experientially too, just recently, where, we do what we first do before we implement, for that same reason that you mentioned, it all based on starting point, is looking at, doing a quick diagnostic on their QuickBooks Online. And if we see 15 bank accounts, none of which have been reconciled since, January or even earlier, then we have a hard conversation with the site about, look, there's a little bit of level setting that needs to happen here before we start making any changes here. And that's a very good point, TC. And so it does quite depend, but I think that range is helpful. Say, looking at 3 to 6 weeks, depending upon where people fall on that line. The last question that we'll have, and this is actually from me, is we'll all go to Father Brendan. And Father Brendan, what if someone's sitting here thinking, this is great? I mean, this is phenomenal, whether it's to do it on their own or to do it with St. Joseph's. And they're saying, but I know my sites can't support it. Even if I weave together 7 to 10 sites or such, they still can't support an effort like this. That was a reality at some point within San Jose when things were kind of running off the ground. Can you talk a little bit about, in your role as being for special projects for Diocese of San Jose, how you bridge that gap and how to engage partners?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, because it is all about that, all about partnership. Is understanding that you need partners from different elements to make this work. So yes, you need the leadership of the diocese, the CFO, the superintendent, and the bishop to sort of buy into the vision. But also you're going to need to bring some resources to the table, because most often, as Brian said earlier, you're not going to have maneuverability with resources to pull that off. I actually think the donors are actually the easiest one to convince. And the reason why is because they're business people, and they've made their money on, as what you talked about, is direct desired outcome sort of mentality, not outputs, but desired outcome. And they want impact for their philanthropic dollars. So you tell them that this is your quality inputs, this is what we're doing, and here's the outputs, and here's our output, our outcomes that we are actually getting, or what we intend to get, and then this is the impact. It is very, very easy to go to a individual or a foundation and say, will you support this parish moving from this sort of style of place and the way they work in efficiency to this level, so they can spend more time ministering versus more time in administration. It's the easiest ask in the world. You can line them up. You could get people now. You can get them in smaller dollars or bigger dollars. It's going to be, then you go back to your bishop and your leadership of the diocese or parish and say, you know what, you match this, we'll do this. So there is an ability to be able to deliver partners who will stay with you, by the way. They will be committed, because they're not just in for a very short time, because they actually do want to affect change, and they do look to have what I call a direct impact with their philanthropic dollars. It's amazing how easy it is to get, again, with a presentation like this, and I'd gladly have a conversation with anybody who wants to have a conversation. What does that look like? What does a typical donor look like? How do you have that conversation with the bishop about how is this going to impact? Because it comes back to what Brian said earlier, and in fact, TC said, is quality data is going to be able to make you decisions to avert disasters that we haven't even thought of what are going to happen. So without that quality data, and that's what this is funding, is fundamentally changing it. So engaging partners is actually easier at the donor than it probably is at the leadership of the diocese, quite frankly. If you got the donor, you got to convince the diocese and take the risk, and what it sort of mitigates against that is having the dollars to come with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I know I've done some coursework and others on fundraising, and I don't remember the exact statistic right now, but it was something like 88% of your donors want to know that you're not only financially solvent, but have good financial processes. So if you kind of extrapolate that to people you're going to talk to, 9 out of 10 of them are going to be excited about this type of initiative. And you're probably engaging people that in some sense already give and want to know that, hey, this is going to compound not only my gift, but everyone else's gift, so that they can, whether it's speaking to peers or others, to advocate that, hey, look, I'm really excited about giving to this organization because they're trying to do the right thing, not just trying to fill up a hole with donations. They're trying to plug it up with their donation, with their processes. So great. I mean, that's all we have right now, and we're kind of right at the 1 o'clock mark. And I appreciate everyone that attended. This is going to be recorded, so in your follow-up, I'll try to make sure that link to that recording is made available in case you want to share with any partners that you think weren't able to make it today, or forward on to any other peers that you think would benefit from this information. But I definitely want to thank all of you for attending. I want to thank all of our panelists. Not only have you all been really a big part of this process and such, but also a part of today. So thank you for your input and attendance. And I hope you all have a good rest of your week. Bye, everyone.